You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Damian, here with my co-host, Matt, coming to you on May 3rd of 2022. This week, we're going to bring back our first division breakdown of the year. Not much has happened, so we'll just run through that, give you at least a standing of how things are looking through sort of the first month of the season. We'll basically do this at the beginning of every month just to keep a general look of how the league is. But before we jump into that, how are you doing, Matt?
Doing good. Just had a pretty good weekend and just hanging out. That's pretty much it. A little bit doing the same thing all over and over. So
Yeah, it seems that way. We can get into our own routines, but
oh yeah.
Looking at we'll just start looking at the AL East here, and really the big storyline of the AL East so far has been the Yankees, and they are currently on a 10-game win streak that allows them to have a 2.5 game lead in the division over the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, the Yankees have been really solid so far this year. Really good all around. Their pitching's been really good. I think that's been kind of the key to them. And they've gotten some of that pitching from guys who, you don't quite typically expect it from. I mean, guys like Michael King. That's been pretty crazy. I think it's been very interesting. Obviously, Garrett Cole even hasn't been the same Garrett Cole that we kind of come to expect. But man, the Yankees, they've been good. Like I say, 10 straight wins. Aaron Judge has been hitting real well. That they've just been a really solid team so far, and definitely deserving of being the leader in this division.
Yeah, and then if you're looking at most of us didn't really pick the Yankees to be the win, at least the leader in the division. Throughout the time, they really had this big hot streak that has catapulted them up after that slow start. But guys like Aaron Judge has been playing out of their minds this year. And they've got solid contributions all the way around. That bullpen has been really nice outside of Chapman, who struggled at times. But, it's kind of, I feel like baseball is better when the Yankees are better. And even though a lot of people will probably hate me saying that, but it's been refreshing that they've gone on this win streak and, have the 2.5 game lead, at least through the first month of the season. I don't know how you feel about that.
I mean, I don't think so. I don't think it's better for a certain team to be good. I think that, the only time that it's better is if there's a team in a new market that you're trying to reach that ends up doing really well. Like, say, if the Marlins, when they first moved to Miami, if they went on a streak of like 4 or 5 years in a row where they won the division, bringing in a new market. But I mean, Yankees fans could be Yankees fans. I don't think it's necessarily good for the game if they're dominating every year. But either way, I mean, it's definitely, they're definitely a good team. And I don't know. I just looked up. They're actually leading the American League in pitching WAR by a half a win, and they have a 2.69 ERA as a team on the season, which is pretty insane. That leads the majors, or is second in the majors behind Los Angeles Dodgers.
That is pretty insane, especially with Cole not getting off to the best of starts. But looking through the rest of the division, like we mentioned, Toronto's second place, 2.5 games back. Tampa is in third place, 4 games back. Boston's in fourth at 9-14, under 500. I don't think many people expected Boston to be under 500, even through the first month of their season. And they're 8 games back of the division. And then Baltimore bringing up the rear of the division at 8-15, 9 games back.
Yeah, so a few notes there. Baltimore's actually pitched really well. I think is kind of one of the things that was interesting to look at. In fact, we talked about the Yankees and the Blue Jays are actually the top 2 in pitching wins above replacement pitching in the American League. Baltimore's number 3, and they have a 3.60 team ERA. They've been pretty good on the mound. Their offense has just been on a historically bad strikeout pace, but they've been pretty solid on the mound, and that's without John Means. I mean, they've had guys like Tyler Wells has done pretty well. Jorge Lopez in 11 innings has a 1.59 ERA. Bruce Zimmerman has been insanely good so far. He is a 0.93 ERA on the season through his first 4 starts. So, some of these under the radar type of guys, they've had a little bit of luck too, but they're definitely a team that is. They're definitely a team that's been a little bit better than expected on the mound. Some of those others, I mean, Toronto's been really good. They're going to be fine. They've got obviously second place, but as good as the Yankees have been, winning 10 straight games, I mean, the Blue Jays are in second place by 2 games right now, 2.5 games right now. They're 15-9. They've been good. The Rays have kind of been the normal Rays. I'm a little worried about their pitching. Hasn't been quite as good as it usually is. But I mean, their lineup, they find a way. Manuel Margot, they signed him to that extension in the offseason, which, I don't think everybody liked all that much. But, especially with the fact that that they had to make some moves like Austin Meadows to fit him in there. But Manuel Margot's been pretty good at the plate. 286 average, 357 on base. He hadn't hit, for much power. But, Wander Franco's been absolutely out of his mind, even though I would like to see him walk a little bit more. But I mean, this team's good. Pitching leaders. I mean, Shane McClanahan's been really good. There's a guy on their rotation that we'll talk about in a little while that I wanted to mention, but we'll talk about him in our players of the week. But I mean, they've been good. They do need to. I think they do need a little bit more, maybe a little more starting pitching, I guess. Even though the way the Rays use their pitching is kind of like starting pitching isn't actually starting pitching and bullpen pitching isn't actually bullpen pitching. So they've been good. And the Red Sox offense has been good. Pitching's been bad. I think the Red Sox really need to get Trevor Story going offensively, though, because he's really struggled out the gate with that new contract. So, but definitely some good pieces there. Honestly, their pitching's been pretty terrible. Outside of maybe Nathan Eovaldi's been pretty good. So Michael Wacha's also been pretty decent. So, definitely some interesting stuff with Boston, but they really need to improve on the mound to get to stay in the race this year.
Yeah, and they've been having to use like Garrett Whitlock, who's been really good, was one of their high leverage relievers last year, who, he's been a multi-inning reliever the first couple times out this year, and then now they've actually started throwing him into the rotation a little bit. He's been pretty solid throughout there, but, when you're having to take guys out of your bullpen and try and throw them in there because your starting pitching hasn't really been getting the job done. And I know one of them is because they didn't have Tanner Houck in Toronto because of the vaccine mandate or whatever. But, like you mentioned, the offense, like Xander Bogaerts is playing really well. JD Martinez is playing really well. Story has struggled. Verdugo has been decent for them. A guy like they counted on Kike a lot last year. He's really struggled to begin the season. As well, Jackie Bradley, you aren't getting anything out of him after you traded him for Hunter Renfroe, or traded back for him, getting Hunter Renfroe. So, like you mentioned, that offense needs to, they need to take a little step up with some of the supporting guys, but the pitching really does need to, find its way.
Yeah, I want to mention real quick too that one guy and Rafael Devers, and obviously everyone knows how good he is at the plate, but he's actually been really good defensively through the first month. Defensive metrics are very volatile, so 1 month is way too small of a sample size, but it's something to look for going forward. He's actually been worth 2 outs above average, and he has a 4 UZR per 150, basically meaning he's been a pretty well above average defensive player at third base so far. It's actually coincided with a positive defensive value in his WAR calculation. So he's actually been positive in base running, offense, and defense, and that's without him being super hot at the plate offensively. Like, he's been good offensively, as he always is, but he hasn't been like scorching hot yet offensively. So that's definitely something to look forward to going forward with Rafael Devers, is that he's actually been really good defensively so far, which is something that was not super expected. So,
yeah, I did notice that they were making a big point about that, and he's been really good. And he definitely took a step forward this offseason in trying to improve that defense. So it's really really good to see, and especially when he gets hot at the plate, like, he's one of the fun hitters to watch for sure. But let's jump over to the AL Central, where we have the Minnesota Twins leading the division with a 14-9 record. Cleveland's sitting in second at 10-12, 3.5 games back. And I'd say probably the surprise so far has been Chicago, the White Sox in third place with a 9-13 record, 4.5 games back of the division.
Yeah, the White Sox have been a little bit of a mess. They just seem like they're not quite all together right now. Obviously, injuries have played a large part as they've had tons of pitching injuries. Lucas Giolito's missed a couple starts. Lance Lynn hasn't pitched yet with his injury. Um, they've had They've had injuries to Garrett Crochet, one of their big bullpen pieces, is missing the season with Tommy John surgery. So that's been a big problem for them. Has been the injury bug, and then in the lineup too. I mean, they've had some missed games from other guys. They've had missed games from Eloy Jimenez. AJ Pollock has missed some games. Yohan Moncada has missed. I think he's missed all the games so far. I don't think he's played yet. So, they've been a little bit rough defensively. They haven't done well. In fact, they've been negative 13 value defensively. There are some bright spots. Dylan Cease, we talked about him a lot in the preseason. He's really looked the part as that ace. He's looked like the guy we thought might be a breakout candidate and a potential Cy Young candidate if he breaks out to where we think he might. Kendall Graveman's been a really good signing so far. Lucas Giolito, who last year was good, but not quite as good as we were thinking he might be. He's been that guy this year. He has a 2.57 ERA in his first 3 starts, even though, like I said, he did miss that one start. But his peripheral numbers are really good so far, too. But, I mean, they've just had issues. Dallas Keuchel has been awful. Liam Hendricks is a 4.82 ERA. Some of that's kind of a one game type thing. The peripherals don't back that up, but this has been a team that is really struggling, especially defensively. Like I say, I mean, they've been a mess defensively. So, um, they'll pick it up. They're not as bad as their record indicates, 9-13. They'll end up being a solid team, but it's one of those situations where you can't win the division in April, but you can play your way out of it in April. And the White Sox have got a little bit of a hole to climb, and the Twins have been good enough to where I think the Twins are, kind of in a good spot right now.
Yeah, and just to further along that point, that the pitching has been really decent for the White Sox. They are, based on the WAR from Fangraphs, they are the 11th ranked pitching staff. And then if you look at their offense based on WAR, they're the 28th best offense. Like, they are bottom 3 in the league in offense, offense and defense this year outside of the pitching staff. So I don't think any one of us expected that to begin the season. But like, the injuries have played a major part in that, which we have mentioned. But like you said, they're still not all the way. It's only 4.5 games. We're sitting here at the beginning of May, but like you mentioned, like, you can play your way out of a division race very easily. And the Twins have looked really good. I think better than their pitching staff has looked a lot better than people think. Like, Joe Ryan has, a guy who they got for Nelson Cruz last year. He's looked really good so far. Dylan Bundy has looked pretty good in some of his starts. They don't even have Sonny Gray right now. And that staff has looked pretty decent all around. And they did lose Miguel Sano to a torn meniscus. So he's having surgery. Might help him, but they did lose him at least. You always have the injury scares with Byron Buxton. We've had a couple this year. He had to miss a whole weekend series, a couple weeks ago, and then he got hit in the hand, but he's back playing now. But I think he had to miss a game for that. So they're going to go as far as Buxton can take them if he can stay healthy, which is always the big if with that. But so far the Twins have looked good. The Guardians have, I think we've kind of expected they'd be right around this 500 area, maybe give or take a little bit each way. They've kind of played to that so far. I think their offense have been just a little worse than we expected. Like, Franmil hasn't been good at all. We've seen some of the other people struggle, but they've had like Stephen Kwan break out and kind of help that. I did see that they like DFA'd Bobby Bradley as well. So he was their starting first baseman coming into the year, and they've already let him go. Looking at the bottom 2 of the division, we have Detroit at 7-14, 6 games back, and Kansas City's also 7-14, 6 games back. Kansas City did lose Alberto Mondesi to an ACL tear as well. So not that he could ever stay healthy in the first place. But just looking at those two, I think we expected at least from the Tiger side, I think we expected them to be a little bit better. And right now they're 7 games under 500.
Yeah, I mean, first off, just looking at the Twins, you mentioned losing Sano. He's actually been one of the worst bottom 5 players in baseball. He's been worth almost negative 1 WAR. So that's been rough for him, and I hope he gets better. But there's definitely better options there. But yeah, I mean the Tigers, you know, they've been they've been pretty bad, and it hadn't all been their fault. They've got a lot of injuries too. Casey Mize is out. He was a guy that they were kind of counting on to take a step forward this year, help out their rotation. Tariq Skubal's been really good. That's been a solid, a really solid development so far for them. That he's been, he really looks the part of a really solid pitcher. Eduardo Rodriguez has been incredibly unlucky. He has a 375 fielding independent pitching and a 5.33 ERA. That's not going to sustain. He'll get back on the mark. So their pitching will probably be okay. Matt Manning's actually been pretty decent, even though I believe he's out with injury right now.
Yeah, yep, he is out.
So, but their bullpen hasn't been especially good. But their pitching's been all right. The lineup, we were worried about it because there really isn't all that much in that lineup, and you needed, Torkelson and Riley Green, who is injured, to really go off, and Javier Baez to play like he did with the Mets last year when he was over there. And Javier Baez, for the most part, has played like that. His walk rate, while it's not good, is 6%, which is far better than anything he's typically run in the 3% range or 4% range. So, he's getting on base at a 333 clip, which is good for him. A slugging percentage of 500, really solid. He's going to be good defensively all the time at shortstop. So he's been worth a half a win above replacement. Austin Meadows has been a really good trade so far. Been a little bit lucky on balls in play, but I mean, 153 WRC plus. He's been, he's been really good. But other than that, I mean, it's just been rough for them. I mean, you got really nothing. I mean, Spencer Torkelson has been a roughly a league average hitter. He's striking out a ton. He definitely looks like he needs a little bit more seasoning and needs to work on his game a little bit. Other than that, I mean, you're getting what you get for when your, main guys are like Jonathan Scope and, Harold Castro and, 39-year-old Miguel Cabrera. I mean, they're just not going to be very good. So, Daz Cameron, Eric Haas. I mean, these guys just aren't all that good. Akil Badu's been rough so far. I mean, I think Candelario will turn it around, but it's been a rough season so far for the Tigers offense. So they'll be okay. They'll be better than they are right now, but they're not making playoffs. So
no, and just to further along that point, and then we'll move on to the AL Central. I mentioned the White Sox were 28th worst in, offensive WAR per Fangraphs. Detroit is 29th with they have a higher WRC plus per the team for the base between the White Sox, but still it's been rough. But we'll go ahead and move on to the AL West now, where we have the Angels leading the division at 15-9, where we have Houston and Seattle tied for second at 12-11, 2.5 games back. Oakland at 10-13, 4.5 back, and then Texas bringing up the cellar at 8-14, 6 games back.
Yeah, so this has been a really interesting division so far. I think everyone kind of knew that the Angels had a chance to put it together.
Drink the juice.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knew they had a chance to put it together because they just got so much talent on that team. I mean, you got Trout, Ohtani, Rendon, Walsh, and then you had a couple of those prospects that have come up that were top 50 guys in the last couple of years between Brandon Marsh, Joe Adele. You figured one of them was going to figure it out. And then, you got some other surrounding players like Fletcher or Max Stassi. I mean, you got a lot of good talent on that offense, and you just knew that if they were healthy, they would figure it out, which they have. The Angels have been so far when it comes to runs scored. I believe they're number one. They're tied for first in the majors in runs scored coming into the night. They are tied for first in the majors in WRC plus. So it hadn't just been like a really high batting average with runners in scoring position. They've been really good so far. They're fourth in on base. They are third in slugging. They're pretty. I don't think they're fourth in batting average. I mean, this is a team that's been really, really good at the plate. and the offense is mashed. But the pitching's also kind of held up, which, I think we kind of expected their pitching to take a step forward, but they've been about a league average pitching team and 17th in the league. They're not striking a lot of guys out, but they're doing a good job managing. They brought in Noah Syndergaard. He's been pretty solid. His ERA is really good, but I don't think he's been quite as good as that. Otani's shown, at times shown improvement. At times hadn't been the best on the mound. Hadn't had his best outings, but he'll be fine. Patrick Sandoval is a guy who should get a lot of love right now. He's been really good so far. So this is a team that's done good. Their bullpen's been pretty good, other than one game the other day that their bullpen really kind of fell apart in the ninth inning. They still won that game, but Glacius really struggled in that game. But their bullpen's been pretty solid. I mean, there's a lot to like about this Angels team, and I think they're probably here to stay, especially in a division that it's not the weakest division, but it's not an especially strong division either. So the Angels have been one of the stories of baseball so far, and I'm praying that they stay there because I want to see Mike Trout in the postseason.
Yeah, so do I. And I wanted to mention a guy. I almost picked him as my player of the week, but I went in a different direction. But I want to talk about the year Taylor Ward is having.
Yeah.
Like if you look just at the pure offensive numbers between him and Mike Trout, Taylor Ward has been a better offensive player this year. Like, it's wild to say a guy who wasn't even on the cusp of, the major leagues the past couple of years, like been a career minor leaguer, just bouncing back and forth, utility guy. And then now he's getting a full-fledged shot, and he's batting 390, a 493 on base percentage, a 746 slugging for a 261 WRC plus. And he's put up 1.5 WAR so far, and Mike Trout's put up 1.6 WAR so far this year. Like, you mentioned Sandoval, you've mentioned the guys on the pitching staff who have taken a real step forward. Taylor Ward has been a big guy for the Angels offensively as well. He's hit some big homers for them. Second or third on the team in runs, like second on the team in RBIs. He's been really, really good this year. And if obviously he's going to cool down some, but if they can get him to be a consistent major league bat for them, even that just makes that lineup even take another step forward. I really do like the Angels. I drank the juice in the, in the preseason predictions. I picked them to win again. I was kind of scared at the time, but I'm kind of happy that they're good because, like you said, we need to see Mike Trout and now even Shohei Ohtani get into the playoffs and have a deep playoff run because I just think that will help the game so much. But looking at the teams that are second and third, Houston and Seattle, Houston's been basically what we expected right now. Offensively, they're the 8th best team in WAR. Pitching wise, where are they at? They're 20th in pitching, so their pitching can be a little bit better. Justin Verlander has looked amazing coming off Tommy John surgery. I was really worried about getting a 39-year-old Verlander, what he was going to come back look like, how durable he was going to be, and he's basically picked up like the Justin Verlander we knew at 32. Like, he's just been really good so far. A 173 ERA. The peripherals don't quite back up to that level, but still a 3 FIP and a 290 xFIP. In 4 games, he's been really well. Jeremy Pena, he's struggled to kind of, get that gap or to replace Carlos Correa, I should say. He's hit some homers. He's at 5 homers. He's leading He's leading the team in WAR, but only with 215 average and a 292 on base. Yordan's been really good this year, but overall the Houston team, I think we expected them to be a little bit better, but I don't think that it'll stay this way for long. I expect them to pick it up.
Yeah, Houston's been a lot better than they're getting credit for. They have a historically low BABIP as a team. I mean, Jeremy Pena BABIP, 226. That's way lower than he'll end up at, and it kind of shows he probably will end up around a 250, 260 average when that BABIP stabilizes. Yordan Alvarez, as good as he's been, he's a 187 WRC plus. He has a 217 batting average on balls in play. Alex Bregman, a 230 batting average on balls in play. Kyle Tucker, 281, low for him. Jose Altuve's batting average on balls in play is 179. These guys are going to be fine. Like they've been really unlucky at the plate. It's been They're not as deep as they were last year. They are missing some of those guys. I honestly don't think they're missing Correa, really. I think Jeremy Pena's been perfectly fine. He's been pretty much the same guy Correa was, except that maybe just not quite as well-rounded, as consistent offensively. But, I mean, he's going to be fine. At 226 batting average on balls in play, that's going to come up. I mean, even if he's not a huge balls in play guy, like – huge BABIP guy. I mean, the minor leagues last year, in the minor leagues, the lowest he ever ran, other than 2018 when he was in low A, was 325 last year. I mean, that number is going to come way up from where it's at right now. So I definitely like what the Astros have offensively. Pitching wise, like you said, they haven't been great, but I think they'll be okay. They're still missing some guys, and I also don't think Framber Valdez is going to end up running a 649 strikeout per nine, 5 walk per nine ratio. I mean, he's better than that. We know it. I don't think that. I don't know. I feel like this team's going to end up being fine on both ends. Their bullpen needs some work. I think that's not super shocking that they're going to need some bullpen work the way this team's looked to start the season, but they're going to be fine. But moving on, looking at the Mariners, I think the Mariners have been really interesting this year so far, and the reason's because I think some of the guys who have really carried them are not the guys we expected. We thought if the Mariners were going to be really good, that they would be carried by. I mean, Ty France, we kind of expected him to be one of their key pieces, but we thought they'd probably be carried by Julio Rodriguez if they were going to be good, and maybe like Jesse Winker. But those guys haven't been good. JP Crawford's been really good for them so far. And then pitching wise, I mean, you look at Robbie Ray hasn't really been good. So, but they've still been, decent pitching wise, and it's because of Logan Gilbert, who we thought, he's a prospect last year. We thought he might end up being really good this year. He could be a guy that carries it, but we definitely didn't expect him. Although I was a little bit low on Robbie Ray, we didn't expect him to be better than Robbie Ray by this much. So that's been pretty interesting.
Yeah, and just looking at, a guy like they brought up Matt Brash this year to be that fifth starter. He's really struggled this year, especially with command. I mean, we're looking at a 6.88 walks per nine so far. Marco Gonzalez, he has a 4.05 ERA, but if you look at the FIP, it's been a 6.43. He hasn't been that great either. They've been a team that has been really carried by their offense so far. You look at their offense per Fangraphs, it's been the fourth most valuable offense so far this year. Whereas in Seattle, their pitching staff has been 26th ranked pitching staff so far this year.
Yeah. One thing that really worries me going forward about Seattle too is the fact that their pitching, if you look at traditional numbers, has actually been good. They have a 3.27 team ERA, but they have a 4.15 team fielding independent pitching, which is what's putting them down so low. That's really worrisome for them.
Yeah, I mean, you expect Robbie Ray to probably take a little bit step forward. I think he'll probably go to more of a mid threes ERA than above 4. Logan Gilbert's been really good this year. He was a really hyped prospect, so I think people expected him to take a step forward. Marco Gonzalez has always been kind of just a solid pitcher, but they need to get somebody else in there. They need to find something else. Like Matt Brash has really struggled. When does George Kirby get the call? Like he's been a guy who has looked really good so far in the minors, and do they give him the step up and maybe demote Brash and see what you have in Kirby, since you've already, right now Brash is struggling. So, the pitching staff, it's something that looking towards the middle of the year when we're getting close to the trade deadline, if it's still struggling, I expect them to make a move there. But offensively, like you mentioned, the guys who have been really driving it aren't the guys we expected, really. Now, Julio Rodriguez, it's been sort of unlucky because of, the bad strike calls he's been getting, like the historically bad strike calls. He won't have a 35% strikeout rate, I don't believe. He hit his first home run. He's looked decent with his approach up there. Just he's been getting awful calls against him. Eugenio Suarez, I expect him to step it up a little bit more. He's looked pretty decent. Jesse Winker's really struggled to begin the year. He crushes righties normally. He's really struggled against them this year. Lefties, he's not been great against ever. But he'll take a step forward. Mitch Haniger, who was a really big contributor for them last year, you expect him to be one of their better hitters. He's hitting 200 with the 222 on base
And
this year.
he's only played 9 games, which
Right.
has been a problem for him in the past. So
Right. And Kellenick, you look at Jared Kellenick, he's a guy that he's had 74 plate appearances, 22 games so far. He's at a 134 batting average and a
yeah, and,
203 on base.
yeah, and Kellenick needs to be in AAA. He really does. I think he's lost his confidence. He's just not seeing the ball well. He's out of whack. He needs to go down to AAA and figure it out. But yeah, I mean, this is a team like you said. I mean, I think it's one of those teams that I think they're a year away still. A lot of people were picking them this year, but a lot of times when you have to call up on all these young guys, as talented as they might be, it takes them a year or two, and not every one of them is going to end up being like the next best thing immediately. And I mean, you talk about Matt Brash. I mean, he definitely was the guy that was very, very, very hit or miss when you talk about what he could be this year. I mean, he's had command issues in the minors. That's a problem for him. He's got like I think they grade him at like a 30 grade command or something. So I mean, you look at like they'll call up a couple guys and maybe one of them sticks and does really well. Um, but it'll be interesting to see. But I think this is a team that needs, they need a lot, and the offense just isn't deep enough. Even though they've had a couple of really good performances so far, they're not deep enough, and the pitching's just little hit or miss right now for me. So
Yep, definitely need to step up consistency wise at least. But looking at the next two, we have Oakland, who offensively has been, they've been all right. They're 21st offensive ranking. Their pitching, I think they were 22nd, so they've been right around that 20s. I think we expected them to be even worse than that so far. So I think they've had, they've had some guys like Paul Blackburn has had a really good start to the year, pitching wise. I think the big story with the A's right now is what we've really seen. It's just the historically low, like 2,000 people per games that are showing up.
yeah.
But and then Texas at the bottom of the division at 8-14. I think we kind of expected that.
Yeah, I mean, with Texas, I don't know if we expected to be quite as bad as they have been. I think we expected them to be not a contender, but they've been really bad, and I'm really worried about them going forward because two of their big free agent signings have not looked good at all. I mean, Marcus Semien has been legitimately one of the worst players in baseball so far. He's got a 186 batting average on balls in play. His plate discipline numbers are fine. I think he'll be fine, but still a minus .4 wins above replacement on the season for him. And then you look at their pitching, and John Gray has not been good either. And he's dealt with some injury so far this year, but I mean in 12 innings he's got a 7.50 ERA. So it's been a little bit of a struggle for two of their big ticket free agent signings that they made. That's worrisome for them. So I think going forward, they need those two guys to take off, and then maybe by the second half, they'll have some guys come up, and some of their minor leaguers that are pretty highly thought of come up and start to take off. But they have had some good performances. Corey Seager's looked pretty good. Adolis Garcia has been pretty good so far. And Nathaniel Lowe has been pretty good. So they've had some good, they've had some really good performances as well. It's just, that they've got some work to do. Offensively, they haven't been that bad. It's just that pitching is, man. Martin Perez has been their most valuable pitcher so far. I mean, it's rough.
Yeah, they are the worst ranked team pitching staff per Fangraphs this year so far. So that should tell you. I think their offense is like 20th or something so far, but been pretty bad for Texas. But let's move over to the NL East now, and we'll talk about the Mets, who are leading the division at 17-8. We got the Marlins in second at 12-10, 3.5 games back. Philadelphia Phillies are third at 11-12, 5 games back. The Braves are 11-14, 6 games back, and then Washington at 8-16, 8.5 games back.
Yeah, so looking at the East, the Mets have been really good. They've had some bounce backs so far from guys that struggled last year. Jeff McNeil is a bounce back guy so far. Francisco Lindor's been pretty good, bounce back guy. I mean, I say pretty good. He's been extremely good. He's been pretty good. Francisco Lindor standard of his career. He's looked like he has in the past. Um, you know, they've had some pretty lucky stuff with balls in play. I mean, Jeff McNeil has a 400 batting average on balls in play. Mark Cannon's got a 465 batting average on balls in play. They're running a pretty high BABIP as a team. Pete Alonso hadn't really got going yet. They probably are going to need him to start, get going a little bit. But the pitching's also been really solid for them. They've been, they've been really good on the mound for the most part. You look at Tyler McGill has really started off well. I don't expect him to continue this pace, but he's been good. Scherzer's looked pretty good. Maybe not quite as Scherzer-like as in the past, but he's been good. Chris Bassett's been solid for him. Carlos Carrasco even's been good so far. So this team, their bullpen, Edwin Diaz, really solid. Everyone on this team's pitched well so far, except for maybe a couple guys. Trevor May's really struggled. That's been tough, and really the only other guys that have struggled for him have been guys who were kind of in mop-up duty. So most of their main pieces are doing well, and that's without obviously Jacob deGrom, who could be back at sometime in June or July. So this team's been really, really good so far, and you look at the other teams in the East, and the NL East is, the Marlins to me have been the second best team in this division, and I think they are in second place. So the Marlins have been really good pitching wise. I mean, just we expected them to be good, but offensively, they're not quite a juggernaut, but they've been pretty good. I mean, they have the run scored category, it's been rough, but everywhere else, I mean, you look at their offense, a 110 on team WRC plus, so their teams hit above average, or as a team they've hit above average, 4.4 wins above replacement. That does include defense, which has been really solid for them. That ranks them sixth in the big leagues in their value out of position players. They've had really good seasons so far. Jazz Chisholm's looked like the guy that we thought he might be able to be. Joey Wendell's looked really good this year. Brian Anderson's had a bounce back. They've been really, really solid, contact hitting team for the most part. Not a lot of home runs, but, when you combine a really, really good pitching with an offense that has a lot of good on base contact guys that play great defense, this is a tough team to beat. And I mean, it's gonna be hard to beat Pablo Lopez and his .9 WAR to start the season. But I mean, it's not just him. Jesus Luzardo has been really good. So he's been really, really good, which is surprising. I mean, we didn't expect Jesus Luzardo. We expected him to maybe take a step forward, but we didn't expect a 2.29 field independent pitching from him and a 3.10 ERA. I mean, in his first 4 starts, he's been really solid. And that's without Sandy Alcantara even get going yet, really. So I don't know. I kind of like this Marlins team right now. They've made me a believer a little bit. They definitely need a little bit more work in their bullpen. That's something that's going to take some time. Anthony Bass has been really good. But they definitely need some of these other guys to step up there. But all in all, I mean, the Marlins have been really solid this year. And I think, truthfully, they have been the second best team in this division so far.
Yeah, so jumping back to the Mets real quick, based on offensively, they're the most valuable team so far. Pitching-wise, they're the 5th best team. They actually did end up throwing a no-hitter on Friday. It was a combined no-hitter between Tyler McGill, Drew Smith, Joely Rodriguez, Seth Lugo, and Edwin Diaz. It wasn't all that impressive because they did end up having 6 walks throughout that game. There was a lot of base runners on there that it didn't make it feel like a true no-hitter, really. But also part of the bigger news this weekend was that they DFA'd Robinson Cano on Monday. A guy who I think they still owed, what was it, 48 million or 60 something million or something?
I think it was about 40.
Yeah, something like that. So they ended up DFAing him, getting him out of there. Leaves guys like JD Davis. There was talks about maybe JB Davis or what's his name, Dom Smith getting traded. They are both staying on the roster for them. But the Marlins, I think the big surprise for the Marlins is, like you mentioned, that their pitching staff really hasn't been the thing to carry them. We thought if the Marlins were going to be good this year, it was going to be led by the pitching staff. The pitching staff so far is the middle of the road. And then if you look at offensively, they're like, the 6th ranked offensive team per the Fangraphs WAR and tied for 5th with the Tampa Bay Rays. You mentioned Jazz Chisholm has been the guy to lead them. Wendell's been good. Brian Anderson, he's been good so far. Is he going to be able to stay healthy? He's a guy who's always struggled with that. And that's without guys like Abisail Garcia being, their big free agent signing of the offseason. He has
Soler.
a 46 WRC plus. Soler so far has been really bad as well. Jesus Aguilar hasn't been good. Miguel Rojas hasn't been good. I mean, a 185 with a 221 on base. Like, we don't expect Rojas to be some, all-star hitter, but he's a better hitter than that, and he has a 44 WRC plus right now. Like, and they're still at like the 6th ranked team right now offensively, which is really wild. And the pitching is just going to get better when Alcantara figures it out. You mentioned Jesus Luzardo. We expect him to take a step back, but who knows? We've seen them develop pitching before, and got, Jesus Luzardo was a former top prospect that people thought had all the talent in the world. So maybe they found something with him and he's able to continue it. But they have been a surprise to me so far. I didn't think they would be, I didn't think they would be really bad like a lot of people were thinking they'd be, but they've been, the second best team in this division so far, like you mentioned, and their record shows it with where they're at. I think the real disappointment has been the Braves so far. 11-14, 6 games back in the division. I mean, you would know better than all of us as being a fan of them, watching them day in and day out, but it just seems, between the injury bug and then just inconsistency so far, they've really struggled.
Yeah, the Braves they really have struggled. Um, you know, it's been tough they've been tough to watch so far. A couple things. The Braves are really high up in hard hit rate, and they are really far down in batting average on balls in play. So they've been pretty unlucky offensively. But I mean, they're striking out a ton. I mean, they are. I think they're like. Yeah, they're top 10 in the big leagues in strikeouts, which, they're not around teams like that are really good teams. They're around teams like Baltimore, Arizona, Cincinnati, Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, the Tigers. I mean, that's the type of teams they're around right now at strikeout rate. They're really struggling. They're not getting good production in clutch situations, really. That's been a problem for them. That's kind of one of those volatile things. They are hitting a lot of home runs still, which is interesting, but they've been around a league average offensive team. The defense has taken a huge step back in the outfield. Now, part of that will come from get a little bit of help from Ronald Acuna Jr. being back when he's fully back in the outfield. He's been playing, but a lot of times he's DHing. They're taking it real easy on getting him back full time in the outfield. So when he comes back to being that full time outfielder, that'll help a lot because I mean the outfielders they've been running out there defensively, Marcelo Zuna, Eddie Rosario before his injury, have been really really rough. But the big problem I've found with the Braves has been pitching. I mean they've been really 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 struggling on the mound. Compared to their standard, they're the they've been about, I believe in field independent pitching, they've been 12th, but they're having over 4 ERA right now, which I mean part of that's bad luck too. They've been the 8th worst team in ERA. They have a huge discrepancy there, but some of their guys that they count on, Charlie Morton has looked awful so far. He's walking tons of guys. He's not getting swings and misses. He's looked really rough. The best pitcher on the Braves so far, and probably possibly one of the best pitchers in baseball so far, has been Kyle Wright. Max Fried's looked really good, but the bullpen's been pretty good. Kenley Jansen's looked vintage so far this year. AJ Minter's looked really, really good, but they've been running guys out there like Bryce Elder and Kyle Muller. Ian Anderson's really struggled so far. So, those are some guys that I think they really need to get these guys going. Because right now, they're giving a lot of innings to guys that are really struggling. So, and they need to get going. They're 7 games out of first place. I mean, that's true. And that like I said earlier, you can play your way out of a division in April. You can't win the division in April, but you can play your way out of it. And they're doing their best to play their way out of it right now. But moving on to the other teams here, the Phillies have been very interesting. They've been hit or miss. They've been they've been top 10 offensively. They haven't been near as bad as we expected them to be defensively. They've been bad, but not near as bad. They haven't been historically bad. And I mean, they just been, their pitching hasn't been great. They've lost some close games. The pitching's been about middle of the pack. They look like a 500 team to me. So there's that, and then you look at the Nationals are awful, and the Nationals probably aren't going to win. They might lose 100 games, and it sucks that Juan Soto is stuck there. So
Yeah, looking at the Phillies, you've had slow starts from guys like Kyle Schwarber. That he'll go through these stretches. He'll get hot later on, and we'll talk about how he's looking phenomenal. But he's on one of his cold patches so far this year. Gene Segura hasn't looked great at all. Bryce Harper, he's not playing up to the Bryce Harper self now. Part of that's because of he's dealing with an elbow injury that could be affecting his swing. It's on his right arm, which is his extending arm. When he's batting, their pitching hasn't been awful at all. Like, Zach Eflin has a 4.50 ERA, but his FIP is 2.87. Like, Kyle Gibson has a 2.93 ERA, but he's more been like a 4 guy. Aaron Nola is a 3.90. The FIP has been right there, but the expected FIP is 2.47. Like, you just expect them to be good. Zach Wheeler hasn't looked good at all this year, although his ERA doesn't. His ERA says he's a lot worse than what he has been, but he's just not striking guys out like he was last year and walking a little bit more than he did. Like, I expect the Phillies to be a little bit better. I expect the pitching to get a little bit better and more of their impact bats to help them, but their defense has been better than we expected. So, where's that gonna balance out over time? And you mentioned the Nationals are just bad and they might lose 100 games, and I don't see any reason why they are going to win more games than what we expect. But looking over at the NL Central now, we have the Milwaukee Brewers, who are leading the division at 15-8. The Cardinals are second at 13-9, a game and a half back. The Cubs and the Pirates are tied for third at 9-13, 5.5 games back. And then bringing up the seller of this division, we have the Cincinnati Reds, who have been the worst team in baseball at 3-19, 11.5 games out of the division. And they are, I think we can easily say that they are already lost the division.
yeah. So starting off with the Brewers, I mean, they're exactly what we expected them to be. They're really good on the mound. They actually might be better on the mound than we expected them to be. They're really bad at the plate. Maybe not quite really bad, but they're like bottom 10 or 12 at the plate. On the mound, Corbin Burns has been Corbin Burns. Eric Lauer has been really good. 23 innings pitched. He's got a 1.93 ERA. His peripherals back that up. 13 strikeouts per 9 for Eric Lauer this year. It's insane. You've got Brandon Woodruff struggled so far. That's been pretty surprising. His peripherals say that he's better than his ERA has been, but still, that's been pretty surprising. Josh Hader has been incredible. Their bullpen's always good with him back there. Devin Williams has been not good in their bullpen, so even with him struggling, they've been good. This is just a really, really, really good pitching team right now. At the plate, they're not very good. As I said, they're not the worst team in baseball at the plate, but they've been pretty rough. They've had obviously Willie Adames has carried this offense for the most part. He's been solid. I mean, their best hitters hitting what, like 250. I mean, average wise, like, even I don't believe in average that much, but like still, I mean, it's pretty bad. Um, you know, they don't get on base at a very high clip, but um, they're just they're just not a good offensive team at all. Um, their team, I mean, Christian Yelich has looked bad. Um, this is just a team that, they're going to go as far as their pitching carries them, which, I mean, their pitching will probably carry them to the playoffs and not out of the first round, because that's it, just like it did last year. I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at with this team. They really need to make some kind of acquisition in that offense to really get going. But I mean, the Brewers are the best team in this division, and I mean, it's kind of close with the Cardinals maybe, but they're definitely the best team in this division. So
Yeah, and then mentioning the Cardinals, looking over there, second place in this division. They're about middle of the road offensively and on the mound. They had their big free agent signing. One of them was Steven Matz. He hasn't, his ERA is 4.56, but the peripherals, don't say he's been bad at all. Like a 2.11 FIP and a 2.50 or 2.49 expected FIP. Like he's 10 strikeouts per nine, 1.9 walks per nine. Like that's really good. He just hasn't been getting the timely outs. Um, Wainwright hasn't looked great, but I mean a 3.50 or a 3.45 FIP is about what you would expect Wainwright to be at this age. Giovanni Gallegos, like the ERA is what really kills this. Like he has a 5.63 with a 2.08, FIP. Offensively, they've, Nolan Arenado has looked like Nolan Arenado's in Coors again. He's batting 359, a 432 on base, a 220 WRC plus so far. Tommy Edmonds had a really good start to the year, over 300 average, over 400 on base. Harrison Bader has really struggled, but I think we don't really know him as an offensive guy anyways. Paul Goldschmidt's looked good. They're even getting Pujols, who's hitting 265 and a 324 on base. Like, they're just a solid team. The Cardinals always find a way to do this. They're never going to blow you away offensively or on the mound. They're just going to find a way to be good, be right around that, 10 to 15, 16 range. And I think they're even a little lower than that right now. But over the course of a season, they'll get better.
Yeah, I mean, and talking about the Cardinals, they really need to start, and I guess they really have. They need to start taking away some at bats from Yadier Molina, who's been really, really bad, and give them to Andrew Neisser, who's been pretty good. That's something that needs to happen. And I mean, they've been solid. Paul DeYoung struggled. They could use some help with the shortstop, but I mean, they've just been a solid team. You mentioned Harrison Bader struggling. In my opinion, he's been pretty good because, as good as he is defensively, putting up a 100 league average offense at 100 WRC plus, I find that I think that's pretty solid. I mean, he gets on base a lot too. He's not a high on base guy at 321, but he's got a good walk rate. So even if his average is low, he's probably, he's still getting on base at an okay clip. So, I really like this team so far. Um, the thing that worries me a little bit about him is on the mound. I think, I think that there's been some guys that like. I mean, Dakota Hudson's got a 2.75 ERA and a 4.66 FIP. Some of their guys that have been starting. The Jordan Hicks experiment's been kind of weird, but he's been starting games for them. Steven Matz has been a lot better than his ERA. Miles Mikolas isn't going to sustain a 1.52 ERA on the season, but he's actually been pretty solid. Wainwright's looked okay. I mean, they haven't blown anybody away offensively. They look like a above average team on offense and defense, and they're pitching, and nothing more, nothing less. And I think that's probably coincides like a wild card type team, just like they were last year. So solid team, not an elite team, but they're pretty good. So
Yeah, and then we'll just wrap up this division pretty quickly because of the other three and jump to the NL West. But looking at third place, you got the Cubs. Their pitching has been awful. 25th ranked in there. Stroman and Kyle Hendricks have been really bad both. The rest of that rotation hasn't given them anything either. They have Justin Steele in there, who has like a 5.50 ERA. Their offense is middle of the road, and even that they struggle at times. Pittsburgh, they're 26th ranked offense. Their pitching is not very much, I think where are they at pitching wise? They're 28th pitching wise. I think we all knew the Pirates were going to be bad. The Reds, I didn't think we all thought they were going to be this bad, but they are 30th offensively and 29th pitching wise, value wise.
yeah.
So
Yeah, a couple quick comments there. The Cubs bullpen has been pretty solid. They've really had four guys that have pitched really well out of their bullpen. Keegan Thompson, David Robertson, the ghost of David Robertson's been really good. Scott Efros has been really good in his first 10 innings, and Rowan Wick's been pretty good in his first seven innings. They've all pitched a decent amount. Keegan Thompson's actually picked 16 innings to an 0.54 ERA, which is really nice. And then you mentioned the Reds. The Reds have so many injuries too. That does not help them. Castillo hasn't really been pitching. Tyler Mahle hasn't been great, but they just, I don't know. The Reds seem like a team that kind of knew before the season they were cooked and melded in. So, that's kind of the worst thing you want to see. But definitely a struggle for them. And also, Seiya Suzuki is still has great numbers on the season, but he's cooled off a lot. and that hasn't helped the Cubs because he was carrying them for a little while there. But
Absolutely. Jumping over to the NL West now, we have the Dodgers leading the division at 14-7, tied with the San Diego Padres at 15-8. Just between the Dodgers have a little higher win percentage, but they're tied technically right now. The Giants at 14-8 are a half game back. Colorado at 13-9, a game and a half back. I think they've been the big surprise so far. Arizona at 11-13, 4.5 games back, bringing up the bottom of this division.
yeah, I think it's been an interesting division so far. You can probably speak to the Dodgers better than I can, but I mean they've had some good contributions at the plate from Freddie Freeman's looked really good so far. Some of their guys like Mookie Betts has been good, but he's definitely not fully going yet. He has a 119 WRC plus, but just a 231 average, 348 on base, 372 slugging. Not great there. But he's been fine. He's a good base runner and outfielder. You'll take 120 WRC plus through the first 20 games of his season. Gavin Lux has looked like is having a mild breakout. Will Smith's looks like his typical self. A lot of people, and we'll probably disagree on this, but a lot of people have been encouraged by Cody Bellinger, and to me, it just seems like he ran into a few mistakes early, but he's striking out at a ridiculously high clip and is hitting 208 on the season. With he does have a 110 WRC plus, but that he really still doesn't look great at the plate. It is a little worrisome to see Max Muncy and Justin Turner not play very well, but I mean, they have gotten great contribution from some of these guys, and I mean, they're so deep that having a couple guys not play at their best doesn't really hurt them that badly. And then their pitching's been good because I'll tell you what, Clayton Kershaw looks about as good as Clayton Kershaw's ever looked, which is pretty hard to believe.
Yeah, he's looked really good. Especially coming off with the elbow injury, losing him and not being able to pitch in the playoffs. Not sure if he was even going to come back to the game this year. He's looked really good. Walker Buehler's looked, really good as well. Struggled with his command in the last outing. But basically the pitching staff has been what's carried them. Offensively, I think there's a little worry with Max Muncy just because, he did have that torn UCL in his left elbow. And he didn't get surgery on that. So I think there's always the fear that might not, be great for him in the long run. And he's really struggled to start the year. Justin Turner, he's a notorious slow starter anyways, maybe not to this level, but he usually starts slow. You mentioned Cody, Cody Bellinger not looking great at the plate. The only thing that I am encouraged while yes, he is still striking out, his at-bats are looking a lot better. It's not like he walks up to the plate and it's 3 pitches and a strikeout. Like, he is consistently getting 6 pitches in an at-bat, 7 pitches in an at-bat. I think the other day he had a 14-pitch walk. And he's hitting balls hard. He's just hitting them right at people as well. So I'm encouraged because he's showing at least signs of when you saw him late last year and into the playoffs, it was throw 3 high fastballs right by him and then he'd go sit right back down. And this year he's taking those pitches a little bit better. He's fouling them off while he's still not hitting them like you expect. The at-bats and the discipline at the plate have been a lot better, and that's what I'm encouraged, even though the results haven't showed that yet. Offensively, they've just been inconsistent, at least. They have big blow-up innings at times, but then there's times where you think that they should score 5 runs and they don't score any. And that's been the part that will improve, especially when you get guys like Muncy, you get Turner, which they haven't really moved them around. They've left them in the heart of the order once they get going, really. But looking at the rest of the division, you got San Diego, who offensively has been the second best team so far this year. I think that's what's been the big surprise, especially not having Fernando Tatis Jr. On there. And then Eric Hosmer, who I'll talk about here in a little bit, he's looked really good this year. Their pitching is middle of the road. I think everyone expected that to be a little bit better. Yu Darvish has really struggled, at times besides that first outing. Joe Musgrove's looked really good. Mackenzie Gore's looked really good. Sean Manaea has been basically what you would expect. But the rest of the staff and then the bullpen really outside of Taylor Rogers just hasn't looked that great, really.
Yeah, that Taylor Rogers for Chris Paddock trade ended up being a really, really good win-win trade because the Padres, I don't know what they would be doing in the bullpen without Taylor Rogers, and the Chris Paddock's been really good for the Twins too, in a place that they really needed somebody. So that's been a pretty solid win-win trade so far. But looking at the Padres, Manny Machado has been extremely good. One thing about the Padres is they are running some really high batting averages on balls in play from their top two guys. I mean, you look at Manny Machado and Eric Hosmer; they are not going to sustain the level they're at right now, especially Eric Hosmer. I mean, he's done this before where he does have one season where he does really well. He just hits the ball on the ground so much, and that's worrisome. But I mean, he's not striking out much. He's getting on base. He's always going to be a pretty good on base guy. And the big thing with Eric Hosmer too is he's been good defensively, which is surprising because he's been a really poor defender at first base, throughout most of his career. But you look at this team and that's kind of where they shine has been defensively. I mean, 6.4 defensive value. They're the second best defensive team in the big league so far. They have been good offensively, but that defense has really shined, and it's helped their pitching staff a lot too. So that's been really solid. When they get Fernando Tatis Jr. back, assuming that they do get him back at some point, in the second half, that's going to be a boost. I like what the Padres have done so far. They definitely look a little bit more mature this year too. Last year they looked like they were struggling at times with just they just looked a little bit more like excitable last year. They looked like they weren't ready for the moment yet, but this year they seemed like they were ready. Moving on, third place right now and is the Giants, and the Giants are exactly what the Giants are. They are a team that has been just say interesting. Their pitching, Carlos Rodon is really, 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 really special. And if he stays healthy, that's going to be, good to watch. Logan Webb has been really good. He's a special pitcher as well. Alex Cobb has not had a great ERA, but he's looked really, really good, and he's throwing hard, which is shocking. And they mix and match. And I mean, does it even surprise anybody that a guy like Jacob Junis has been really good for them?
No, not at all.
John Brebbia, Zach Littell, these guys have been really good for them. That didn't surprise anybody that they figured out a way to utilize some of these guys that nobody else wanted. So,
yeah.
That's kind of the story of the San Francisco Giants is they utilize guys the way nobody else does. Jock Peterson's off to a really hot start. That's kind of a Jock Peterson thing. He'll be off to a hot start and then cool off all of a sudden. Me and you both know it. He's been their most valuable player offensively. You look at, their offense really is Brandon Crawford and then a bunch of guys. And, other than Jock Peterson, who's been incredible. So, offensively, they do worry me, but so far this has been a really interesting team, and that pitching's going to be really good all year.
Yeah, they've missed a lot of people as well. Like Lamont Wade, they've missed him all year. Yastrzemski's been out. Longoria's been out. Brandon Belt's been on COVID. Like they've missed a lot of their key pieces as well. That was really good for them offensively last year, or have been a part of that core, at least. Another name you didn't mention that they just find, like Harlan Garcia, he has a 0 ERA, even though the peripherals don't back it up. I think the big thing for the Giants so far, they've been a top 10 pitching team. Their offense is right around that 13. I think they're 13th in the league right now. I think it's been that they haven't been as good defensively. They're usually a team that we see pretty sound defensively, and right now they're, middle of the road defensively. So I expect that to take a step forward, especially when they get all these other guys back. But, they always find a way. They do. And it's an even year, which means that they're going to be amazing somehow after they did it in an odd year last year. But I want to spend a little bit of time on the team that's fourth in this division because I don't feel like they've been talked about enough. That's the Rockies at 13-9, a game and a half back. I think everyone assumed that this was going to be a 3-horse race in this division right away. And Colorado has really done a great job this year. Pitching wise, they're 14th, which is saying something for pitching in Colorado. War wise, offensively, I think they're 18th, and that's without, really getting much of an impact from Chris Bryant. He's really struggled. And I even think he's on the IL now. But you look at guys like CJ Crone, who's having, broke out last year, is having that year. Connor Joe is a name I don't feel people talk about at all. And he had a really good 2020. This year is 282, 371, a 142 WRC plus, been their second most valuable hitter. Ryan McMahon has looked pretty good. Overall, the batting average isn't there, but on base wise, I mean, he's doing it. Randall Grichuk has been one of their best trades, like trading Raimel Tapia to get Randall Grichuk, who's hitting 338 with a 3. His on base isn't good, but he's slugging well. Their team, Jose Iglesias has a 306 and 368. Like, they've been really good offensively, which, I mean, that's Coors Field effect, but their pitching, I don't think pitching is a lot of people you expect, especially in Coors, their pitching is going to be one of the worst in the league. And they're right about middle of the road, which is, I think, an accomplishment for them pitching in Coors.
Yeah. So one thing that I like to look at for when Colorado and how they've been successful with the pitching is they are fifth in the big leagues in ground ball rate from pitchers. And when you're in a lot of places, like if you're in a normal stadium, that doesn't really, I mean, it matters, but it's not as big of a deal. But Coors, that's a huge deal, and I think that's big for them because not only in Coors are you giving up home runs are high there, but the outfield is so large that you get a lot of those pop-ups and weak contact. Even if you're getting weak contact, it's falling for hits because the outfield is so large. If you get it on the ground, it's that infield's the same as the infield anywhere else. And being top 5 in the big leagues in ground ball rate is a very big deal for them, which is, that's kind of how they've been successful because they haven't been striking a ton of guys out. They haven't been walking a ton of guys, but I mean, it's not been, but their home run rate's low in a ballpark like Coors. And that's mainly because of getting the ball on the ground. That's been important for them. And then you look at their batting, and I mean they've had some pretty high. Had some pretty good performances. Like C.J. Cron, you say he's been really good. Connor Joe's been really good. Ryan McMahon's been good. Charlie Blackmon's been pretty solid, which is a good development. He struggled. He's struggled at times the last couple of years. He's definitely been aging. Randall Grichuk has a really high batting average on balls in play, but he's been pretty decent. This is a team that I think is I think they're a decent team. I also want to mention that I don't think Brendan Rodgers is going to be the worst player on this team all year. He's got a 158 batting average on balls in play. He's been one of the worst hitters in baseball this year, minus .6 WAR. He's not gonna be this bad all year. He might not be great, but he won't be this bad. But this is a team that I think is definitely a lot better than they were kind of expected to be. I didn't understand coming into the season the hate that they were getting. I mean, I get some of the hate for them, but I don't know. I mean, it just feels like it feels like a lot of the fact that the Rockies have botched execution on a lot of their moves they've made doesn't necessarily make them a bad team. I think a lot of it makes them a team with a low ceiling, which I think this team is. I think they're about at their ceiling right now, which is right around 500. And I mean, they've had some good sequencing. They're 4 games over right now, but 4th place in the division is probably the ceiling for this team in this division. But still, they've been pretty decent. So.
Yeah, and then quickly just wrapping up with Arizona down bottom of this division. Pitching's been pretty decent. Merrill Kelly's been good. Zach Gallen's been pretty good as well. We've seen Madison Bumgarner. The ERA shows 119, but the FIP and the xFIP are mid 4s, high 4. The team's not great when you're giving Zach Davies meaningful innings, and offensively. They've had guys like Nick Ahmed be pretty good. Pavin Smith's been really good. Dalton Varsho's played pretty decently as well. Ketel Marte's really struggled to start with. Christian Walker's really struggled. Carson Kelly, another guy who you expect to be, one of their better offensive contributors, has been really awful this year. Negative 14 WRC plus and negative 0.5 WAR, and he's been positive defensively. So.
Carson, you mentioned Carson Kelly. He has actually got a higher WAR pitching than he does hitting.
There you go. Fun fact of the day.
He's pitched 1 inning this year.
I think that's how we just need to wrap up talking about the Diamondbacks right there.
He's a 3.08 FIP and a 0 ERA.
That sums everything you need to know up about the Arizona Diamondbacks so far this year. So. Let's jump over and we'll do our players of the week real quick. If you want to start with who is your hitter this week?
My hitter this week is Yordan Alvarez. Yordan Alvarez, as we know, is a really, really good DH. One of the best in the big leagues. I think he's I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think he's the second coming of David Ortiz as a DH. He's really, really, really good, and he's having an incredible start to the year. A 199 WRC plus on the season so far. He homered again today. Um, this is a guy that over the last week has really just been killing it. He has hit he's hit a 435 with a 552 on base and an 870 slugging over the past week. That's a 312 WRC plus, 3 home runs, 7 runs scored, 6 RBIs. That's in 7 games, .8 WAR. You know, if Jordan Alvarez could play a position, he would be one of the best players in the big leagues. But with him being a DH, he's just a really, really, really good player. But still, Jordan Alvarez has been really solid, and I like him a lot.
Just think the Dodgers traded him for Justin Fields. Fun fact of the day. So for my hitter this week, I mentioned him a little bit earlier, but I'm going with Eric Hosmer. He's had a really good season so far, but his week 400 batting average of 556 on base, and 850 slugging, a 289 WRC plus, .7 WAR this week, 3 homers, 5 runs, 9 RBIs, a 26% walk rate, pretty much, which is pretty insane. He's been one of the key contributors for that San Diego Padres lineup, right with him and Manny Machado. And, the week he had after the whole offseason of him getting traded, even into, potentially opening day and right after opening day about the big trade with the Mets or whatever, and to come out and have the year he's having so far, I think it's pretty cool.
No doubt.
But who do you have for your pitcher of the week?
My pitcher of the week is actually going to be Drew Rasmussen from the Tampa Bay Rays. This is another. We talked about that win-win trade between with Chris Paddock and Tyler Rogers. This trade right here has been a really good win-win trade too. This occurred last year. Willy Adames going to the Brewers, and the Rays getting Drew Rasmussen and JP Fireeisen back. Drew Rasmussen so far this year, they've converted him into a quasi starter. Like, he's not pitching a ton of innings in each start. He's kind of an opener, but he's kind of a 3 to 4 inning opener, more so than that like 1 inning opener that they'd been using. So he's kind of somewhere between an opener and a starter, but he's been really good in the past 2 games. This past week, he actually pitched 11 innings in his 2 starts, so that's kind of close to starter level. I guess that is starter level production these days, but he only gave up 1 run in those 11 innings, 9.8 strikeouts per 9. 1.6 walks per 9 on the season. He's been really solid. A 3.13 ERA on the season. 3.17 fielding independent pitching on the season. This is a guy that in that role, trying to pitch him 4 to 5 innings a start, just see the batting order twice. I think he's going to be real successful. He was the same way last year between the 2 teams, and I think he's going to be that way this year. The Rays have carved out a perfect role for a guy who has kind of reliever upside. But of course they have. I mean, it's the Rays.
Yeah.
What do you expect?
They always find a way to do stuff like this. So it's not surprising at all. But for my pitcher of the week, I went with Dylan Cease, a guy who we talked a lot about in the prediction show, that we think he could be a potential Cy Young contender this year. Looking at his week, he had 2 starts, 13 innings, a 1.38 ERA, and 0.39 FIP. One of his starts, he had, it was a 7-inning shutout, or 7 innings of shutout ball against the Angels with 11 strikeouts. And his other start was 6 innings, 2 runs, and 9 strikeouts. Did have 3 walks against the Royals in that game. But, Dylan Cease has been everything we pretty much expected him to be, outside of the one little start in Cleveland where he gave up 4 runs in 5 1/3. He's given up 4 runs altogether through his other 4 starts this year. So, Dylan Cease, especially with the pitching injuries that the White Sox were dealing with at the beginning, and then still now with Lance Lynn, being able to carry that team has been pretty impressive so far, and one that I think a lot of people saw coming into the year is he could be one of those sneaky good guys, and one of the upper echelon pitchers, kind of growing into it. But
No doubt about it.
But Cease has been really good. But I know we rambled on a little bit longer on this episode, but with the first rundown, we like to hit at least on every team and give a little bit. When we do these moving forward, they won't be this long, I promise. But unless you got anything else to wrap up on?
I don't believe so. Season's been interesting so far. We have noticed that maybe offense trending a little bit up compared to what it was for the first couple weeks, where everything looked awful offensively. So that's interesting. But we'll keep an eye on that going forward. But maybe talk about it a little bit more next week. So, but yeah, exciting season so far, and just ready to keep it rolling.
Yeah, and see what that offense looks like when we start getting into the more heatful months of summer.
Yes.
But that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.